Scahill.
Thank you, Garret Scahill, and you're welcome, Minister. I want to speak today about something simple but powerful, and it's communication and the role it plays in tackling loneliness and isolation among our older people. The Telephone Support Allowance was introduced in 2018 to help people living alone with the cost of staying connected and through phone or a home alert system, and it's paid at a rate of £250 per week, and in 7 years that has never once been increased. To put that in context, a landline can cost anywhere from 30 to 40 euros a month, and the monitoring fee for a personal alert system can be up to 90 euros a year. This small payment is no longer meets a fraction of those costs. It's also highly targeted support, available only to those who live alone, qualify for the fuel allowance, and are already receiving payments like the state pension or disability allowance. And there are some of the most vulnerable people in our community, often older, living alone, and struggling financially. I'm asking today for a modest but meaningful change to increase the allowance by at least £750 a week, develop a benchmark so it keeps pace with real communication costs, and expand it to include broadband, renaming it the Telephone and Internet Support Allowance. The cost estimated by alone is an additional 64.7 million, small compared to the social benefit it would deliver. Alone, as you know, is a national organisation that enables older people to live well at home and as long as possible. They work to improve physical, emotional and mental well-being through an integrated network of staff and volunteers across the country. In Roscommon, Alone is doing incredible work supporting older people to age at home with dignity and independence. Alone has 141 active volunteers in Roscommon, supporting over 600 older people so far this year. Each one of these people depends on being able to stay in touch, whether it's a phone call from a volunteer, check-in from a support worker, or even a video call from a family member. Communication is often their lifeline. Loneliness and isolation is not a small issue, they're public health challenges. We know that being cut off socially can have the same impact on health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. A phone line or broadband connection may seem like a simple thing, but it's often the first and easiest way to prevent loneliness. It keeps people connected with family, friends, neighbours and services, and it allows older people to pay bills, book medical appointments, or simply hear a friendly voice at the other end of the line. We cannot talk about digital transformation, about inclusion, about connected communities, and leave behind the very people who most need these connections. So today, I'm asking to increase the Telephone Support Allowance by a minimum of £750 per week, create a benchmark so it stays in line with real costs, and expand it to include broadband, renaming it the Telephone and Internet Support Allowance. This would help more than 160,000 people by 2027. People living alone, people who are already struggling, people for whom communication means safety, dignity and connection. We must review the Telephone Support Allowance because when we talk about tackling loneliness, this is one of the most effective and immediate ways to start. A phone call, an email, a video chat. They seem small, but they can mean the world to someone who lives alone. So let's make sure no older person in Ireland is left disconnected. Thank you very much, Mr.
Entire Richmond.
I truly want to thank Senator Scahill for his extremely emotive and very clear advocacy in his contribution. As Garret, the Telephone Support Allowance is a weekly payment of just €2.50 for people on certain social welfare payments who are getting both the living alone increase allowance and the fuel allowance. The primary objective of the Telephone Support Allowance is to support access to critical communications infrastructure for the most vulnerable people at risk of isolation, including older persons and those with disability. This critical communications infrastructure can, of course, include broadband access. While the proposal by the Senator is to be welcomed, all proposals, including the proposal to increase the Telephone Support Allowance by a minimum of €7.50, could only be considered while taking account of overall government policy and budgetary considerations. This also applies in respect of any commitment to develop an appropriate benchmark for the payment. In respect of expanding the payment to include its use for broadband charges, another objective of the Telephone Support Allowance is to help maintain access to personal alarms or phones for security. It can, of course, also be used towards the cost of broadband. It is worth noting that the payment is automatically paid with a person's main weekly social welfare payment. The Government is committed to supporting older persons. Given the many competing demands for the limited funding available to the Department of Social Protection, there was no increase to the telephone support payment announced in Budget 2026. However, other supports were provided by the Department for older persons. These supports were increased, an overall package of €1.15 billion. This significant package balances the payment rate increases together with a targeted package of measures aimed at supporting the most vulnerable in society. A weekly €10 increase was secured in the maximum weekly rate of all primary social welfare payments from January 26. There will be proportionate increases for qualified adults and people getting a reduced rate. Furthermore, a €5 increase in fuel allowance from €33 to €38 per week from January 26 was also secured, and this will provide an additional €140 during the annual fuel allowance season. A Christmas bonus will also be paid to over 1.47 million long-term social welfare recipients in December of this year. In order to receive the Telephone Support Allowance, a customer must be in receipt of a qualifying payment and also in receipt of both the Living Alone Allowance and the Fuel Allowance. This means that those in receipt of the allowance already receive considerable support from the Department of Social Protection. The Living Alone increase is paid at a rate of €22 a week, a yearly total of €1,144 in recognition of the greater challenges facing those living alone in avoiding poverty. Since 2019, the Living Alone increase has more than doubled in value from €9 to €22. The rate of fuel allowance payable has also increased significantly in recent years, and from January 2026 will provide support of €1,064 to a household during the fuel season. Increasing the rate of household-based schemes such as the Living Alone increase in the fuel allowance provided targeted support to households that are at a higher risk of poverty, as evidenced by recent ESRI research. Those in receipt of the Telephone Support Allowance also have access to the Household Benefits Package, which comprises of an electricity or gas allowance and the free television licence. This provides a further €580 a year to this cohort. Furthermore, the Department of Social Protection provides for additional needs payments as part of the Supplementary Welfare Allowance scheme to help people meet essential expenses that they cannot pay from their weekly income or other personal and household resources. These payments are available through the community welfare officers. So whilst I fundamentally do believe the Senator's suggestion is merited, I think it is important to look at it in the context of the overall package that was delivered for people in receipt, notwithstanding the vital need to ensure that communication is at the heart of addressing isolation, particularly in rural areas such as Roscommon.
Garret Scahill, number one.
Thank you very much, Minister. I fully welcome all of the additional supports that were put in place following the budget and looking forward to 2026. And as part of the programme for government, there was a review put in there to review the fuel allowance, the household benefits package, the living alone allowance, and they were all welcome. But this is a demographic that I would not be doing my job if I didn't try to fight for every penny to support them, for every opportunity to give them that extra bit of financial support and that financial independence, because these people get up in the morning and make decisions of whether they will use one service or another, whether they will eat twice a day or something, because they're living on the margins. The isolation and the mental health impact costs the state significantly more than what we're talking about in investment here. I know it's not possible to produce this sort of money overnight. I know we're looking at the next budget cycle, and I will speak to the Minister about this. But as I said, I would not be doing my job if I didn't stand up for this particular demographic, and also standing up for the 9,117 alone volunteers that in 2024 delivered 264,000 voluntary hours to this particular sector, something that alone has estimated is valued at 7.81 million in voluntary hour support. So it's about providing a lifeline, keeping in touch, keeping connected, and by doing so, enabling these people to have independent living, which we're all actually here to support and to support them in doing. So thank you very much, Minister.